Thanks for joining us for CBN News Today. I'm Charlene Aaron.
And I'm Ephraim Graham. An ancient Christian community in Iraq is no more. For nearly 2,000 years, the city of Mosul has had a thriving Christian community. Now, Islamic extremists have driven nearly all of them out. As Mark Martin reports, the few remaining could become martyrs.
Iraqi Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki condemned the attack on Christians in Iraq by the Islamic State extremist group. He said Christians have been exposed to violent acts that have never been witnessed before in Iraq. Sunni militants told them to convert to Islam, pay a tax, or face death.
There are no Christians left in Mosul, Gary. They've all been driven out. They were stripped of all their possessions. They were left with nothing. Their houses, which were stamped Nazarene, meaning Christian, and then stamped again, saying property of the Islamic State. Their cars, even their wedding rings, sometimes with their fingers attached if the rings wouldn't come off.
An official with the Nineveh governor's office says only 25 Christian families remain in Mosul. Al-Maliki pledged to protect the Christians, but so far his government has been helpless. The director of the Center for Religious Freedom at the Hudson Institute, Nina Shea, says the Christians are facing a heartless enemy.
They hate Christians, the villages that they have not conquered on the Nineveh area surrounding Mosul. They have turned off their waters. It's 120 degrees in there today. They said to them, "You don't deserve water."
Not only are Islamists targeting believers, they're also destroying all traces of Christianity in the area. Video has surfaced showing Islamists destroying the tombs of biblical prophets Jonah and Seth.
This is a very ancient city that goes back to biblical times. I did see that video as well. They have also captured ancient monasteries from the 4th century, and they are burning the ancient early Christian manuscripts. These are priceless for the heritage of Christianity.
And then there's the refugee crisis. UN officials say around 2 million refugees and internally displaced people from Iraq and Syria reside in the northern Iraqi region of Kurdistan. Mark Martin, CBN News.
The Sudanese Christian woman who nearly died for her faith is now a free woman. Miriam Ibrahim arrived in Italy today following an extended stay at the U.S. Embassy in Sudan. Ibrahim's release comes just one day after a congressional hearing about her case. She is married to an American but faced the death sentence for apostasy and was being prevented from leaving Sudan with her husband and children. Religious rights advocates say her case is just one of many.
She is the tip of the iceberg, that for every one case of Miriam Ibrahim, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of those Sudanese and others that are victims of a draconian implementation of Sharia law that creates an existence for the Sudanese under the leadership of President Bashir that is really an abomination on religious freedom.
The United States needs to show more concern about religious hostility and persecution abroad, in particular the case with Miriam Ibrahim, where I think the response of the United States has been woefully inadequate.
At Wednesday's hearing, congressional conservative Chris Smith said the State Department is aggressively promoting gay rights at the expense of religious rights.
Israel is denouncing a United Nations Human Rights Council decision to investigate its actions against Hamas. This comes as Hamas terrorists continue to launch rockets at Israeli civilians. CBN Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell has the story.
Hamas launched nearly 80 rockets at Israel. On the same day, the UN decided to investigate Israel for war crimes. Israel came under fire for attacking the Wafa hospital on Tuesday. The IDF released this footage showing how Hamas used the hospital to shoot at Israel, and a transcript of a phone conversation confirming the hospital was empty.
This use of human shields is extraordinarily cynical, it's grotesque, it's inhuman. But what is equally grotesque is that Israel was condemned in the Human Rights Council. It's a travesty of justice.
Meanwhile, Hamas leader Khaled Mashal said his group is simply defending what he called Palestinian land. Israel emphasized the playing field is not level. Israel gives up the element of surprise and puts its own soldiers at risk by warning Palestinian civilians to leave the places it will attack, while Hamas actually uses their own civilians as human shields. Yet with firepower on its side, and footage of devastation on Hamas's side, Israel is often at a disadvantage to present its case.
I think people see the effectiveness of Israel's defense systems, of the Iron Dome, of their warning systems and shelter systems, and they see that as a consequence of those measures that Israel's invested a huge amount of money in, that there are very few casualties on the Israeli side.
Richard Kemp, former commander of British forces in Afghanistan, says it's Hamas, not Israel, that's committing the war crimes.
On the contrary, the Hamas-Palestinian side in Gaza, no money's been invested in putting civilians in shelters. And people see footage of casualties and they automatically assume, therefore, Israel must be committing a war crime.
Meanwhile, Secretary of State John Kerry continued his shuttle diplomacy towards reaching a ceasefire.
We have, in the last 24 hours, made some progress in moving towards that goal.
In the meantime, Operation Protective Edge entered its 17th day. Behind me is an IDF artillery battery. Besides hitting targets, Hamas targets inside Gaza, one of the main goals of the IDF remains finding and destroying the many infiltration tunnels dug by Hamas inside Israel.
If there is no border with that, if there is no boundary, if there is no limit to their access, then we are completely exposed and there is no line of defense. It's an unbearable reality.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News, on the Israeli-Gaza border.
Meanwhile, the FAA has lifted its temporary ban on flights into Israel's airport in Tel Aviv. That ban was put in place after Hamas rockets landed near the airport, threatening planes loaded with civilians. Here at home, the head of the IRS says it may be possible to recover emails thought to be lost for good. Those emails are part of an ongoing investigation into the agency's targeting of Tea Party and other conservative groups. John Koskinen confirmed the existence of backup tapes for Lois Lerner's computer hard drive at a hearing on Capitol Hill. Investigators are reviewing the tapes to see if any information can be recovered and shed light on thousands of Lerner's missing emails. The former official was in charge of the IRS's tax-exempt division at the center of the controversy. Her hard drive was destroyed in 2011 after a computer crash, but House investigators believe the hard drive was just scratched and most of its contents could have been restored. Republicans accuse the agency of stonewalling and a possible cover-up.
The testimony I've given in the past was accurate. As of the time of what I knew, I testified as to what I knew. Right now, the question is, do I know anything more about tapes, backup tapes? And the answer is I don't know any more, other than that the IG is investigating whether there are backup tapes and whether they're in fact recoverable.
Republicans plan to hold another hearing into the targeting scandal next week.
A federal judge is calling Colorado's voter-approved gay marriage ban unconstitutional. Judge Raymond P. Moore's decision is in response to a lawsuit by 6 gay couples. Moore put his ruling on hold to give the state a chance to appeal, but some clerks have already started issuing marriage licenses to gay couples.
The former editor of an Iowa newspaper claims he was fired for expressing his religious beliefs on a personal blog. Bob Eichelman filed a complaint with the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission against the Newton Daily News. He's claiming discrimination. Eichelman lost his job back in May after he wrote on his blog that gay organizations wanted to reword the Bible to, quote, make their sinful nature right with God. The publisher of the Newton Daily has declined to comment.
An Indiana school district is telling teachers and other staff they cannot lead prayers during school-sponsored events. The Freedom from Religion Foundation filed a complaint against the district in May after a teacher opened an awards banquet with prayer. The group says public school teachers must be religiously neutral while at work. District Superintendent Dan Tanu says the student-led prayers will be allowed to continue.
Coming up, compassion versus the law, how the border crisis is challenging the church.
House Republicans and Senate Democrats are rejecting each other's plans to fix the border crisis. Thousands of young immigrants continue to flood the southern border. President Obama wants $3.7 billion to help deal with the crisis. House Republicans have scaled that back to $1.5 billion. One House proposal would send the National Guard. Another would change a 2008 anti-trafficking law to allow Central American children to be turned around quickly at the border and sent back home. Senate Democrats refuse to include that change, and they want to spend $1 billion more than the House. It is not clear if the two sides will be able to agree on anything before heading home in August for summer recess.
Faith groups are answering the call to help the flood of illegal immigrants entering the U.S. along the Texas-Mexico border. In Texas, Border Patrol agents requested help from the Salvation Army in several cities. The group is serving hot meals, providing showers and clean clothing to immigrants. Salvation Army officials say humanity is at the heart of the issue, not politics.
And the Salvation Army mission is to meet human needs in Jesus' name without discrimination.
And until the border crisis ends, the Salvation Army is asking for donations of food and clothing to help those entering the country.
Dr. Russell Moore is president of the Southern Baptist Convention's Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission. He is just back from the border, where he toured some of the detention facilities. Mark Martin asked Dr. Moore how his visit to these shelters affected him personally.
Dr. Moore, how did your visit to these shelters affect you?
Well, it put a human face for me on a moral crisis, walking around in these rooms filled with children at a time when our churches are sending children the same age off to youth camp or to vacation Bible school. To see children who have been through unspeakable things, it put a human face on it for me.
What did these kids tell you about why they came here and what they're looking for?
Well, we asked an entire room, why did you come here? Why did you make this dangerous trek toward this country? And the answer was immediate from all of them: violence. They talked about drug cartels and gangs who were enacting taxes, as one of them put it, simply to live where they lived.
What are churches and pastors doing to help these children who made a dangerous trip and are now alone in this country?
Well, we have churches on the border who are ministering right now to kids, to their mothers. We have people who are involved in the detention centers ministering to the children. But the primary thing right now is that I'm receiving a deluge of requests from churches all over the country asking what can we do immediately.
What else can be done to help these kids?
Well, we need to make sure that there's funding to actually deal with the crisis of ministering to these children in terms of their immediate needs for food and clothing, and to adjudicate the cases of the children, decide what's going on in the cases of these particular children. We need the body of Christ to recognize that whatever our political differences, these children are created in the image of God. These children are loved by God, and we need to respond to them with compassion and not with anger or fear.
All right. Well, has our immigration policy contributed to this crisis, and should it be changed? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think our immigration system is a wreck. It's broken right now. I think almost everyone in this country agrees with that, and we don't have a clear or a coherent program.
How do we as Christians balance our desire to protect the borders while still showing that compassion that you mentioned to those who are here?
Well, no one wants laissez-faire open borders. We all recognize that national security demands that we know who's coming into the country and why. But we also need to recognize that these children are not our enemies. They are not invaders. These are children who are desperately seeking escape.
Well, what did these kids tell you about their experiences on the journey?
Well, they didn't want to talk very much about the journey itself, and I really didn't press them. I didn't want to further traumatize them by spending a lot of time on that. They mostly talked about the situation back home, how scared they were back home, and they talked about America and the sense of hope that is present in America.
Dr. Russell Moore, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate your time today.
Thanks for having me.
Up next, push-up bras and thongs for little girls. See who's pushing back against our racy culture and what they're doing to restore modesty in America. How much skin can a girl show before it's a sin? Well, modesty can be a sticky subject even among Christians.
But as Jennifer Wishon explains, being modest doesn't mean a woman can't let her beauty shine.
If you look around, it's easy to think modesty is dead. Everywhere images tell us less is more. And the pressure for young girls to look sexy has never been more potent.
I think the media promotes sexiness.
They're wearing the 8-inch heels.
It's very hard as a parent to try to raise your child in this society that we have right now with some rules and with some structure.
I know that the reason why most girls dress like that is because they're trying to get attention for boys.
We met Stephanie at an event in Virginia designed to show young girls modesty is hot.
It all has to do with beauty, but beauty should really come from the inside out. And unfortunately, the generation that we're living in says the less you wear, the more hot and beautiful you are. But there's something really beautiful to mystery.
Jem Goshen is the creator of Modest is Hottest. She's a worship leader who never dreamed she'd be preaching demureness. But just look around, she says, even in the church, and you'll see it's needed.
I didn't come to know the Lord till I was much older. I was 21. I didn't grow up in youth groups or doing any of that. So when I became growing in Christ and knowing Jesus, I realized, wow, why are we dressing the same way I used to dress in the clubs?
Instead of kind of throwing the rule book at him, it's sort of a way of explaining like it's out of love. You know, you love the Lord, he loves you. And so this is kind of how you respond, is out of modesty.
What is modesty?
Modesty, you know, that's an interesting topic. If you look at the scriptures, modesty is self-control in how you present yourself externally so that people can see your heart. The Bible teaches that our primary role, the reason we're on this planet, is to glorify God. Anytime we dress immodestly or we dress to show off our bodies, we're bringing glory to ourselves. That's the greatest, I think, sin of immodesty, is that we're saying, look at me, instead of saying, look at God.
Gresh is one of the experts. Her ministry, Secret Keeper Girl, travels the country teaching girls and their moms about modesty and why it's important. She's also written books about modesty and knows it can be controversial, even within the church.
And the tough thing is, there aren't any exact rules, right?
No. God didn't spell it out in black and white for us. Instead, he's asked us to search with our hearts.
The Secret Keeper Girl and Modest is Hottest programs offer girls fashion tips to help them be modest while still showcasing their personal style.
We're reading our Bibles and then we're going out looking like a hoochie mama, right?
Research shows one of the top factors that puts a young person at risk for engaging in sex outside of marriage at a young age is appearing or dressing older, dressing immodestly. And it's increasingly easy to do. Companies now market adult products and garments to extremely young girls.
Some of the products in the last few years that have been sold to 8, 9, 10, 11-year-old girls have been push-up bras, thong underwear called eye candy, and eyeliner and mascara. In the last 3 years, eyeliner and mascara sales for 10-year-olds has doubled. Why is there anything to double?
So if you can reach girls between the ages of 8 and 12, 8 and 15, and teach them modesty, you really can change the trajectory of their lives.
That's the point. Doing it before the age of 12 is critical to putting her on a pathway to purity.
And what about boys and men? The Bible doesn't offer any modesty instructions for them. Gresh suggests it's because men are more vulnerable to the beauty of women than women are to the allure of men.
Do women have a responsibility to help protect the eyes of men who tend to be more visual?
The way that a man treats a woman is entirely his responsibility, period. However, a woman is called to exemplify the fruit of the Spirit. One of the fruits of the Spirit is self-control. And I think we need to be able to exemplify that in the way that we dress and in the way that we present ourselves.
Do men have a responsibility to be modest?
Well, sure, men have a responsibility, and I wish we could get some dudes to start talking about that. Like, the Abercrombie guy is so naked. I think men have the same responsibility for us to be able to see their good works, for us to be able to see the inner qualities and strengths that God has put in them, not their bodies.
Gresh says if we all wake up every day focused on honoring and glorifying God, then we'll all dress appropriately. And Jem Goshen says if you're not sure, just ask your parents.
It isn't in what the billboard says you need to look like. It isn't in being a size 2 or a size 10. It's in being who God made you to be. It's in accepting that you are fearfully and truly wonderfully made by Him, regardless of what society says.
Jennifer Wishon, CBN News.
I'll tell you, that is definitely an issue that is a sticky subject.
Indeed. Having a young daughter myself, it is something that really, really concerns me.
It's needed in industries like that.
Stay with us. We're coming right back.
Finally today, hundreds of people from all over the world are in Ohio this week for the 77th annual running of the All-American Soapbox Derby.
For some, it is a first-time family adventure. For others, it's a family tradition. The week is filled with fun for all ages leading up to the big race on Sunday. Kathy Shirley is in town to root on her grandchildren.
We were here last year for both of our grandchildren, and we were here a few years ago when our son participated. It's a great family adventure. I think it's a real bonding time for the whole family.
This race will happen Saturday, and while this year's the event is looking great, a few years ago, financial struggles inspired the making of a movie called 25 Hill. In the movie, kids spearhead a campaign to save the Derby. The president of All-American Soapbox Derby says the support of the community has kept the Derby alive. One to watch on Saturday, indeed.
It looks like so much fun.
It is.
Indeed. Well, that's going to do it for now on CBN News Today. You can find more of our exclusive coverage of the issues you care most about at cbnnews.com.
Tell us what you think about the stories you've seen here today. You can talk to us on Facebook or at CBN News on Twitter. It is Thursday. Make it a thankful one, everybody.